Hi there, my name's Ben Williams. I'm going to take you through Claude Code. In the last video, we looked at Claude Desktop. We first started off with Claude Chat, Co-work, and then we went on to Claude Code within the desktop. So there was a bit of a superficial overview of Claude Code, but we explained the differences. So just a reminder, Claude Chat, that's kind of your thinking partner. You're able to ask and draft documents, you brainstorm, summarize, upload documents, ask questions, similar to Chat GPT and Gemini. Then we got co-work, and like you can hand off tasks. It's got capabilities. You can connect to application. You can plan things. It delivers. You can kind of walk away. And then we touched on Claude Code, which you can actually do within the Claude Desktop. But a better way to do it is within an IDE. But all of these three components of Claude, they also work quite well together. So it's not like, when you're in Claude Code, you don't use the others. So I'm going to sort of take you through the theory before we actually get into, install Claude Code. So the first thing then is, choosing an environment to install Claude Code on. And look, I've gone and chosen Cursor, and I'll explain why. I'll just give you a quick look at what Cursor looks like. So Cursor, it's an integrated development environment, and on the left-hand side, you've got all these different folders and files. And in the main center screen, you go and chat. You chat to Claude, and that creates files, it creates applications, it creates documents for you. And this is kind of the environment that you will see. The fact that, it's got the word code, don't be kind of, too scared by it. You don't have to be that technical, and you can do a lot without, even developing applications. So yeah, stay with me. So I did actually start off with Visual Studio Code, and that's a Microsoft product. And it's quite a broad product, and it can be used for, I guess, a number of different applications. And then I kind of moved to Cursor, and I found really the differences. They're very, very similar on face value when you first start using them. So to transition from VS Code to Cursor, it's very, it's seamless. But Cursor is designed AI, in the core. When it was built, it actually was forked off VS Code. Anti-gravity, very similar again. That's kind of agent first. And it's forked off VS Code. And, if you're entirely or predominantly in the Google, ecosystem, that's perhaps the right place to start. But I'm going to start off with Cursor, and I know if I do need to switch, it's going to be seamless. All right, so when we get into Claude Code, in some ways you can see it as an AI assistant. You can actually build an AI assistant, or you can, build an application, or you can get it to know about your business. But if we just take the AI assistant side of it, so it's very good if you've got repetitive tasks. You've got a particular command, and that command will actually go and do it for you, and it will repeat that many times over. You can also use it to scale your team. You can track everything about your business or your team, from revenue, Google Analytics. It interfaces with pretty much every application that you could imagine. So not only can you use it for your own business, but working with clients, you can kind of on-sell the skills, or you kind of track the engagement with your clients. If you're going down the avenue of building your AI assistant, what you do, or about your business, you need to give it a project structure. So a good starting point is just think about how you organize your files and folders. If you're using Windows, like Windows Explorer, how you organize your content, or if you organize in SharePoint or whatever it may be, or whatever document management system. You do a similar thing with Claude Code. So if you are quite an organized person, that's a good thing. But it's a bit different in that you don't kind of drag files back and forth or create folders. It sort of does it for you, but you also talk to Claude Code to kind of shape it and organize your data. Then stage two, once you've got that preliminary sort of setup, that folder structure, you then go and give it context, okay? And we'll look at that in a bit more, detail. So with the context, information around your business, yourself, the industry you work within, and you can give it rules as well. So one of the first things that people start to do is they will go and create a skill. So a skill is really just typically something that you will do on repetition. It can be a workflow if you like, and you kind of wrap it up in a skill, and then you can execute that skill in a number of different ways. When you start talking to Claude, it will then go and execute the skill. An example might be creating a proposal for a client. Okay. And the great thing about Claude Code is that it grows with you. You build in all these different layers, you build in all the skills that grows with you. So really what you're building becomes more and more powerful, and it has a memory, too. Before I go to the next slide, I'm just going to go back and look at Visual Cursor, not Visual Studio Code. And hey, look, this is kind of my environment. But what we've got is, these are the folders, so some of the key ones is really the commands and the skills, and we'll come on to them. Yeah, we've got context. This is pretty important, as we talked about. It needs to know about you, about your business, your strategy, your direction. And then you have, the data coming from multiple applications, and you can get updated or informed, every day. And then your plans. So there's sort of two kinds of plans. You got your typical, plans that you may be quarterly or weekly, but also when you're using Claude Code, you kind of go create plans often before you go and implement. So it's always quite good practice to get Claude to create the plan for you, to review the plan, modify it, and so forth, and then go implement it. Okay. Right, so going a bit deeper in the folder structure, in Cursor or in VS Code or in Anti-Gravity, you'll have something like I have here. But if we just sort of focus on really the key folders, and it's really up to you how you set it up, but this is not a bad starting point. So this is really the root folder. And the most important file is called the Claude.md file. And this is really like the brain of Claude. And it knows about everything. And each time you have a Claude Code session, it loads Claude.md file into memory. And what that means then is that it knows about your project, it knows about your business, and it knows where to go. It's a bit like a table of contents or an index, in a book, but a bit more. And you will see it's really important to take care of that file. But again, to update it, you just speak back to Claude and ask it to be updated, typically at the end of each session. So we touched on context. So this is crucial to the work, everything that you do. If you're running your business, you're going to have your strategy, whether that's 2-3 year strategy. You've got personal information about yourself, about your team, and then you'll also have current data. So having this up to date, or having the context, then it will inform a number of decisions, a number of actions that you make. And because we're all familiar of just using conversational AI, when you ask it to do something, it doesn't do what you want. You may hallucinate, and typically that's because there's nothing wrong with the AI. It just doesn't have the right context. You haven't given it the right context. So super crucial step. get the context right, you know, you can go through and almost like interview yourself to explain what your business is, what your strategy is. Okay. Then we've got workflows, and we've got these in the form of skills, and we'll come on to those in a bit more detail. But just imagine, you know, your business, you've got a number of things that you do over and over again. And, you know, the idea is that you want to make them as repeatable as possible, and they all get wrapped up in skills. Typically, these will be prompts and often assisted with scripts or mini programs that Claude Code creates for you. But we've also got commands, and you know, commands are very useful. You actually explicitly, you know, call them or type them when the skills are more implicit. They get invoked when you say, I guess, the words that kind of match what the skill definition is. So yeah, you would have seen I may have had, I don't know, 10 or 15, you know, folders at the root level. I think that's probably as much as I want to go down. But key ones are kind of plans, yeah, as I just mentioned before. Reference, they are typically, you know, documents that you refer to, or they could be images, a number of different things. And then, you know, you're creating skills, or you're creating tasks that reference these documents. They do something with it, perhaps they use a skill, and then they, you know, produce an output. From that output then is a deliverable, something that you may send on to a client or present or whatnot, really. So that's the folder structure. We'll go over this in a little bit more detail. So this is the Claude.md file, and it's really like the brain, and it knows about your business. You know, it can reference other files, but you don't want it to become too fat and bloated. So I must keep it under 300 lines. And yeah, every time you start a new session in Claude, it gets loaded into memory. Yeah. And that helps you, you know, with more, I guess, actions you take or conversations you have with Claude. We've got to remember that all models, they have a limit, the number of tokens. Now, you're probably going to be using Opus 4.6 or Sonnet 4.6 at the time of recording. This is April 2026. So we'll just move on from the brain, and then we look at, yeah, it basically gets loaded. Then we got the system prompt, and then we got, you know, your message where you're going back and forth with Claude. And quite often, yeah, we come up with the plan. First, we execute the plan. You know, it's using the context that's within the project, your skills. And then you can have rules. Rules could be something like, you know, formatting, or, you know, things that you don't need to repeat. Quite often, these rules can be global to many projects. Okay. So that takes us on to the building stage. So I guess the starting point is, after we've taken the context, we know what the business is, we know who we are. And what I mean is, we brought that into Claude, we kind of got that foundational layer. We can go a little deeper, you know, and you start off with your standard operating, you know, procedures. You can bring them in. You may have other project documentation you can bring in. You may even have ChatGPT, or, you know, history that you want to bring in that will help with your context. And then what you want to do is you really just want to start using it, start chatting away, you know, with Claude, and, you know, kind of see where it takes you. Now, I do encourage you to really just give it a go. You know, there are so many videos out there, and you can kind of get, you know, overloaded by all these YouTube, you know, videos. But the best way of learning is really give it a go, you know, and maybe at the end of the session, as we come back to the brain, the Claude.md file, you can say, look, I would like you to update the Claude.md file. That kind of reorganizes, you know, everything. So try it first of all within Cursor, if that's your chosen IDE, or VS Code, or anti-gravity. you can also use it, within Claude Desktop or within the browser, but I would suggest, trying it there. Then you can kind of level up. Like, what you can do is build a skill. Now, you may be a little unsure, how to do that. But imagine you've just gone through, a session with Claude Code, and you've developed something. Maybe you've generated a, proposal letter to a client. At the very end, you could say, right, this is what I've done. I want to repeat the process, for future clients, wrap this up in a Claude skill, and then it's just going to wrap it up in a Claude skill. It may come back and forth with a couple of questions, and yeah, kind of job done. So next time you log on, or you got a new prospect, you could, or at the end of, I guess, a discovery call, maybe you've got the transcript, which you should have, that gets sent to you. You can then upload the transcript, yeah, and basically say, go create me a proposal for this client. And what it will do, it will go and reuse that skill that you'd already created, and it will have generated that Word document or PDF document for you to issue. And then lastly, just remember that, it's continuously learning about your business. It's not self-learning, but what you're doing is you're providing, more and more data, and then it has, more and more context. And not just that, you're creating, skills and capabilities. So it really kind of, grows with you. And looking at the title of this slide, keep building. That would be my advice. Build, build, build. And when I mean build, I don't mean that you have to build software. This tool is great, really just to run your business, perform tasks. You don't have to build software, but you will find that it's quite easy, and that will support your business. All right, so yeah, thanks for listening. And yeah, if you haven't already installed, Cursor or Visual Studio Code, yeah, please do so. So it's kind of 2 core steps: download it, get it installed, and then you will need to install the extension, the Claude Code extension. And obviously you will have created a Claude account, ideally the Pro plan to start off with, which is $20 per month. All right, now we've got the theory out of the way. We're going to download Claude Code, and I'm going to use Cursor as the IDE. So you'll need to go to your browser, go to cursor.com/download. Yeah, find your operating system, so typically Windows or Mac. Select the download button. Then I'd like you to go and install the file. If you're prompted with a message around kind of administration, just select OK. All right, I'm going to just say yes, yes, yes. Just accept everything. All right. All right, so that's going to install. I will just show you, I guess, the folder structure behind the scenes. So in the previous video, we talked about organizing our files. So in Claude or Cursor or Visual Studio Code, you have the concept of workspaces. And a workspace is a place where you can have many projects, and within each workspace, that's where you have your file. So I'm going to suggest you start off with these folders. There's context. That's about, who you are, who your business is, what you're trying to achieve. Maybe a little bit about the project. Then we've got the outputs, what gets, generated. And we've got plans. These plans can be, weekly, monthly, or they can be plans that Claude Code creates. Reference the kind of documents and images that you'll be using as part of your, I guess, solution. And then we've got a scripts folder. All right, well, that didn't take too long. That's already installed. So that's Cursor. So I'm going to open it up. All right, when you open up Cursor for the first time, it's going to ask you to sign up. You may be prompted for a paid account. You don't need the paid account. I wouldn't recommend it at this stage. I'm still fine using the free version. So I'll select login. Okay. I'm just going to use my Google credentials. Okay, I'm all set. So let's have a look then. All right, so what we've got here then, you can create a new project or open a project. So I'm just going to open a blank project. Okay, so the blank project, you literally just open a folder and that's it. So if I go into my C drive, I've created a folder called SRC and then a workspace called My Workspace. So I'm just going to select that. So we got these folders, as I set up before, and what we want to do is actually go into the extensions. So just going through these icons here, that's the search, that's kind of GitHub, which we will come to towards the end. That's around version control. These are the extensions. So extensions are really sort of plugins to this integrated development environment. So this is just a one-off install. There's only one thing that you need to install. So we got Cursor installed, and now we need to get the core Claude Code installed. So if I just type in, Claude Code, I'm just going to select install. Okay, I'm just going to click Trust Publisher and install. Okay, got a firewall issue or warning. I'm just going to accept that. Basically say this is an acceptable, application. So I think it's installed. So what we'll see now then, I'm going to close a few windows. So let me just click on the cross there, the close button. And then if I go back here, this is like the Explorer view. Okay. Now, what I'm going to want to do is go to these three little dots and select open or Claude Code open. All right. Now, so basically it says that I've got Claude Code installed. Yeah. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to select Claude Code open. All right. So yeah, Claude Code's installed. But what I need to do is, log in with my subscription. So I just select the orange button, select open. It's going to go off. It'll prompt me to sign in to Claude with my Google account, my registered Google account. I select OK, or I select my email address, select continue. Okay, and then I authorize. All right, so I think that's all good. So we go back to, Claude Code. Now it's come up with an error message. So I'm glad it's come up with that because I just want to show you how we troubleshoot that. Well, what I'm going to do here is just take a screenshot of that error message. Okay, I'm actually going to go into my Claude desktop and I will say, problems in installing Claude Code with Cursor. And yeah, if you just get in the habit of this, is whenever you're using, Claude Code, if you just don't know something or there's an issue, you just type in a message and it will tell you what you need to do. Okay, so what it's come back with, it says that this is a common issue with Windows. It's asking me to install Git. So Git is this way that you version control your files. So I'm going to download the Git link. All right. So I'm just going to click on the download. Okay, it's downloaded. It's a very small file. I'll go into the downloads folder. Just double click. Okay, we're going to accept the license. Just select yes, yep. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about Git and GitHub towards the end of the video. But it's a way of when you make a change, it's a bit like a document management system or Google Drive, or it's all installed. Yeah, okay, so the next step is saying is to restart the terminal and cursor. Look, we'll just restart cursor, see what happens. So I'm on cursor, I'm gonna, close it down. So I'm going to run cursor, I'm just going to type in cursor. All right, it'll take a little while to open, but what it's doing, it recalls which is the last workspace that it needs to open. Okay, we're all pretty much good to go now. So for me, it looks like it's installed. So I'll just if I do a test and I just say, look, I'm just going to see if I can chat with it. Okay, yeah, that's about right. It's April 12th, 2026. So we're all set up, but I'm going to take you through and we'll explore. Yeah, I'm going to take you through, and what we'll do is we'll explore cursor in a bit more detail. Okay, so this kind of chat, we don't need this chat window that comes with cursor. So I'm just going to click on the close button. Okay, and then I select the three little dots here, and I'm going to select close all. Okay. Okay, we're going to create a very simple application, or more so a landing page. So it's similar to the video before. We'll actually go and create one to sell voice agents, to plumbers. So I just type in that prompt and I select the up arrow. This then goes and executes the prompt, and we'll kind of, wait to see what it produces now. Okay, Claude's done its thing, but then it's asking for permissions. It's saying it wants to write to this particular file, so it's creating a new HTML file. I'm just going to say yes, or I could say yes, allow all edits to this session, and I'll do the latter. So I'm not going to be prompted as many times. So it's actually gone and it's created this HTML page. It's telling me, what it's done. And when you're going through this for the first time, it's it's worth looking to see what it's done, see if you can agree with it. You can see that it's got these pricing tiers: 97, 197, and 397. And let's say I'm not happy with that. I agree with the 197 and 397. I could say, like pricing, yeah, tiers should be 197, 397, and I don't know, yeah, 497. Let's go 697. Okay, so just as you would do in Claude Chat or Claude Code, you can just sort of start typing back and forth, and it will kind of go and update it. So what we'll have a look at is we'll look at the HTML file that is created. So the first thing to note is it's gone and created it in a folder called landing page. So what I can see is that it's gone and created a new folder here. It's perhaps not the best place, but that's where it's done it, and this is the file. Okay, so what we're going to have a look at is we'll have a look at that file and see how it renders. So let me go back to here. It's created this folder, it's created this file. Yeah, so this is the landing page that is created. You can see it's relatively, basic, but I think it's done a pretty good job. It talks about losing jobs due to missed calls 24/7. These are some of the benefits that you should expect. And it's also saying, hey, this is a fairly seamless process. You can be up and running within 10 minutes. Yeah, so pretty much all about reliability, SMS, follows up and so forth. But what it's produced, and whether or not it kind of, services, I guess, the client's needs. The main focus here, what I'm trying to show you now, is what's going on, behind the scenes. Okay. So if I then go back to cursor, all it's done is it's actually gone and created one extra file. Now, if you recall, there were commands and there were skills. So I'm just going to show you one of the commands. One's called /init. Okay, we'll just run that, see what happens. Okay, so it's gone through that /init is initializing. So it's gone and created this Claude.md file, and like what I said, that was before, that was really kind of the brain, if you like. It knows about the context, and we'll have a look at that as well. Okay, so we'll look at the Claude.md file, markdown file. So I click on that, and what we can see is we've got 3 panes here. So the first pane is really like Windows Explorer. This is where all our folders and files exist. Then we've got our chat interface that we're going back and forth with Claude. It's interpreting what we say, passes it to the LLM, and does, jobs and tasks on our behalf. And then on the right-hand side, this is, really some of the files that we're looking at. So if I look at the Claude.md file, markdown file, you can preview it as well. So if we look at that, this is, telling us what the project is all about. Okay. So I can see at the moment it's saying that it's a single file static landing page. Okay, and this is the entry point. This is, giving us a bit of architecture about it, where it's saying HTML, CSS, JavaScript. The previous video, it was kind of using React. It had like a front end sort of designer. So yeah, so the Claude.md is saying what technology, it's using. So this is some of the technical stuff. And then it's looking at really, well, what is it producing within, the HTML file. So it's got like, it's got a navigation, there's file, menu items, there's a hero bar, there are pain points, explains how it works and so forth. Okay. So you want to see the Claude.md file as your friend, and it's something you need to look after. So because it acts as the brain, and really it kind of gives you it gets loaded into memory pretty much every single session you have with Claude, and so it needs to know what you're all about, or what the project's all about. Yeah, so keep it under 300 lines. I'm going to ask it to go and create a ROI calculator for this voice agent. So I'm looking for something a bit more interactive, within this landing page. So I'll click OK. Okay, I paused the video there for maybe about 2 minutes, and we'll see what it's produced. So what we can see is that it's saying that the ROI calculator is live on this page. Okay, and then it has a number of, inputs, missed calls 1 to 60. So as we kind of, toggle between, I guess, these input parameters, what we're going to see are the output values. They're going to change. So we'll have a look at, the user interface. Okay, so it looks much the same, but there is a menu item here called ROI calculator. So I select that, and what we can see then is here is the the ROI calculator. Straight away I can see, well, it looks quite good, but it's not appearing on a single page. So I want to make it a little bit smaller, or fit the screen, if you like. Okay, so I'll go back to Claude Code now. All right, so I'm going to enter the following prompt. So yeah, I'm acknowledging what they've done is good, and but I need to kind of scroll a bit to interact with it. So I'm going to ask it to make it a bit more, compact. So I'll select OK. Okay, that was another minute or two, and this is what it's come up with. So look, I don't need to read through that. I'd rather just look at the web page to see what it's done. So look, I'll refresh that. I can see it's all on the one page. I'm still not 100% happy with that. I would perhaps ask it again to kind of move this up. But let's start playing and interacting with it. So, what we said here was the number of calls, and that was typically of the demo, or not the demo, I guess the scenario we talked about. I had 15 calls, per day. Look, average job value 450, or maybe it's, accommodation value, whatever it may be. And then what we've got is, land to job close rate, so we can play around with these. Anyway, as we're moving around or we're going from these different, input parameters, we can see, the value or the ROI, being calculated. So yeah, you can see, how easy that has been to, to produce. And yeah, that can be your CTA, if you like, your call to action. So I'll go back to cursor now, recapping, we've only put 3 or 4 prompts in, and we've actually, generated quite a, a good landing page. So what I might say now is kind of, update the Claude.md file. What I can see is that it has updated the Claude.md file with these attributes or constants, the recovery rate and the weeks per month. So this is my Claude.md file, and you would find those, changes in there. So we're kind of going beyond the intent of this exercise. Look, we have, Claude Code, set up. So what I'd like to do now is go through some of the, menu items or options that we have within Cursor. So the file option, typically what you will do is you'll go open folder, and that will be, your workspace. Okay, we will have a look at what else is here. The view command is quite useful. So like the Explorer, this is the Explorer option here. So if you ever find that this pane disappears, then you want to go View Explorer. Remember we looked at the extensions before? Go to View Extensions. We had Claude Code installed, but you can have many other, plugins installed as well. So what a lot of people like to do is actually install is you can basically change the color of these icons as well. So yeah, Cursor comes with many plugins, so you don't need to worry about that too much at the moment. You are up and running. Okay. So what I'm going to show you now is the new terminal, or the terminal. So if I select new terminal, this is the command line interface. So you can go in and you can, run, commands, through here. But for now, we're just going to keep focused on, going through in a conversational way. But know it's there at the terminal. Okay, another useful option is if you go File, Preferences, and then you've got all the different settings. So you can go into Cursor Settings and change things around in here. Okay, so you may find that, I don't know, could be the font size is too small or it's too big. What we have here is where it says edit automatically, we can change these settings. We can ask before edit automatically, or go into plan mode. And there's another one which is kind of like live dangerously, just let Claude do pretty much everything without asking you. So it sounds a little dangerous, but in the end, that's what you do kind of want a lot of the time, because it does sort of hold you back selecting OK to all the pop-up messages. So that's one reason why you may want to, change it, but I wouldn't suggest doing that, initially. So one of the things that I tend to do is check in the code, and what I mean by that is that all this has been generated, for you. So you need to not just save it on your machine, but you should push it into the cloud, and we do that through GitHub. Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit more about GitHub. So in some ways, it's a little bit like OneDrive or Google Drive, but I guess it handles information and it stores different versions of your code base. So if you make a mistake, you want to roll back to a previous position. The code is also portable, so that means it's easy to go from one machine to another machine. And as your team grows, you can have multiple people working on the same code base. It can be accessed anywhere, and you can do branching. So we're getting a little bit technical here, but the main idea is to know that GitHub exists, and you would want to create an account and to push your code or copy your code into this repository. So we'll be referring to the word repository and repos. All right, so I guess, yeah, it's over to you guys now. So yeah, go with the install and maybe just try and create something simple. And if you run into problems, ask Claude. If you run into problems installing Cursor and Claude Code, you can always fall back with, Claude Chat or ChatGPT, whatever you have, and just ask the questions and it will, kind of direct you in the right way. Okay, thanks for listening. Cheers.